Elaine stood by the window, her fingers pressed lightly against the cool glass. Outside, a man with mirrored sunglasses opened the back of a moving truck. Cardboard scraped against concrete. Tape screeched. Dust rose. She didn't speak. Behind her, the screen door creaked. Michael's voice was casual, like he was talking about the weather. "We're off tomorrow." "Mom." A pause. He stepped into the room, holding a clipboard and a permanent marker. "I sold your house." She turned slowly. Michael smiled. Too wide. Too polished. The kind of smile used when trying to sell something, not protect it. He didn't look like a boy anymore, but he didn't look like her son either. Not in that moment. "I thought we agreed," she said quietly. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "We did." He uncapped the marker. "You agreed this house was too much for you." He scribbled something on a box labeled kitchen. Fragile. The stairs. The repairs. The flooding risk.
"I'm helping you."
He didn't meet her eyes. That told her everything.
Elaine crossed the room, each step measured. She looked at the box he marked. Her handwriting had been on the other side, the neat cursive she learned in Catholic school. It had been scratched out. "This wasn't your house to sell?" Michael chuckled, but it was hollow. "Come on. Mom, let's not do this again." He set the marker down with a sharp click. "You'll love the new place. Single story, modern kitchen, no stairs. HOA takes care of everything. Think of it like a fresh start." She tilted her head. "You mean, like when your father died?" He blinked. The smile slipped for half a second. Then it returned. Sharper now. Colder. That was different. She nodded. "So was this house?" Elaine turned away. She didn't trust herself to keep looking at him. Instead, she walked slowly toward the hallway. Each step creaked beneath her. She wanted the floorboards to remember her, to know she hadn't left willingly. When she reached her bedroom, she closed the door gently, then locked it. She sat on the edge of the bed. The room still smelled like cedar and lavender. Outside, the lake shimmered in the late afternoon light. She could hear the gulls. Elaine opened her nightstand drawer. Not the top one. Michael had already rummaged through that. The second, beneath old birthday cards, a dried corsage, and her husband's wedding band. There it was. A sealed manila envelope. Her fingers touched the seam. Not to open it, just to remind herself it was real. 4 years ago, after her husband's second stroke. They had sat in this room together. He had insisted they create a trust, not just a will, something legal, untouchable, to protect the house, to protect her. She had nodded through the meetings, the signatures, the notarized copies. It all seemed distant then. But he'd been right. She traced the edge of the envelope. The document inside made the current sale invalid. The house had been placed in an irrevocable trust. No transfer could occur without her written consent, which she had never given. Outside, another box thudded against the porch. Voices rose. Laughter. Elaine stood up slowly. She didn't feel old. Not today. She crossed the room and opened the closet. From the top shelf, she took down a small fireproof lockbox. Inside was the second copy of the trust, the one her husband had told her to keep in case someone got greedy. He hadn't said Michael's name. He hadn't needed to. Elaine slid the box beneath her bed. She smoothed the blanket. Tomorrow, Michael would escort her out of the house with forced kindness and smug certainty. He would think it was finished. But it wouldn't be. Not yet. She walked back to the kitchen. Michael was stacking dishes, humming to himself. He paused when he saw her, then smiled again. "You'll see." "Mom," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder.
This is a good thing. Elaine nodded. Yes. She waited, then added, You've really planned this, haven't you? He didn't catch the tone. He grinned, down to the last detail. She looked out the window. The lake was still, deceptively so. Elaine folded her arms, then walked to the porch, where a single box sat alone. The label read, Sunroom. Photos. She crouched and peeled back the tape. Her fingers brushed a picture frame her wedding day. 1969. The shoreline looked almost the same. She closed the box again. Behind her, Michael was still humming. She let him. She let him believe he had won. Because the best part of a storm, she knew, was the moment before it breaks. The moon was high when Elaine slipped her shoes on. She moved through the house like a memory. Quiet, familiar, almost invisible. Michael had gone to bed 2 hours ago. She heard him laughing with someone on the phone earlier. Probably Rachel. His voice had that confident tone again, too much certainty in it, like a man who thought the door was already locked behind him. Elaine walked into the study. It still smelled like old books and pipe smoke. Even though her husband had been gone 3 years now, she hadn't changed anything. Not the shelves, not the carpet, not the key behind the third row of family photo albums. She reached for it now. The small brass key fit perfectly into the hidden cabinet drawer under the desk. Click. Inside sat a leather folder, bound with a red tie. She had forgotten the weight of it. It felt heavier than she remembered. Elaine opened the folder and pulled out the backup trust papers. They were crisp, sealed. The ink was rich black. Her husband's signature as sharp as ever. His lawyer, Mr. Donnelly, had stamped every page with a firm blue notary mark. It was all valid, all binding. Michael didn't know. That was the part that hurt the most. Not that he tried to sell the house. Not even that he used her trust. What hurt was that he didn't think she'd fight back. Elaine sat in the desk chair, holding the documents in her lap. The lake outside was still, but inside her chest, the wind had already begun to shift. She picked up the phone and dialed. Donnelly Law. A sleepy voice answered. Alan, she said softly. It's Elaine. A pause. Then warmth. Elaine? You all right? I need you to look over the deed transfer forms Michael submitted. He went quiet. Then, you got the envelope ready. She nodded. He thinks it's already done. But I still have the originals. Good, he said. We'll stop him, but we need to time it right. If we void it too early, he'll try again through another route. I understand. You're strong, he added. I always told your husband that. He'd be proud. Her eyes stung for a moment, but she didn't let it show in her voice. He was always 2 moves ahead. Now I have to be. I'll make calls tomorrow. Don't say a word to him yet. Let him feel safe. I plan to. She hung up, then slid the papers back into the folder. She relocked the drawer and returned the key to the bookshelf. Back in her room, she didn't sleep. She just sat in the dark, listening to the house settle around her at 6:47 a.m. Michael knocked on her door. Mom, you up? She stood and opened it. He was dressed in jeans and a button-down shirt, too crisp for someone who claimed to be helping out. There was a scent of cologne she didn't recognize. I'm heading out to finalize a few things, he said, casual as always. I'll be back with coffee. Maybe a breakfast sandwich? She nodded once. Egg and cheese? No meat? He smiled. Got it. As he turned to leave, she asked, Michael. He looked back. His eyes were sharp, expecting resistance. But she only asked, Have you spoken to your sister? He shrugged.
She's on board. Why, Elaine gave the softest smile. Just wondering if she's all right. She's fine. Everyone's fine. You will be too. Once this is over. Then he was gone. Elaine waited until the car pulled out of the driveway. Then she moved. She went into the kitchen and pulled down the recipe tin from the top cabinet, the one Michael always thought was just for cookies. Inside, wrapped in parchment and pressed between two yellowed index cards, was the receipt from the last property tax payment and the registration proving the house's placement in the irrevocable trust. She held it like a sword, not yet drawn, but sharp all the same. 2 hours later, Elaine walked into the small bank off Harbor Street. The teller smiled. Mrs. Morgan, haven't seen you in a while. I need to access my safety deposit box. Yes, of course. ID. Elaine handed over her license, waited patiently as the clerk led her to the back room. The box opened with a whisper. Inside, another sealed copy of the trust. Signed, stamped, untouched. She took out one paper, just one, then returned the rest, locked it again, and left. When she stepped outside, the wind from the lake carried the smell of pine and distant rain. She pulled her sweater tighter. Later that afternoon, she stood on the porch as Michael returned. He handed her a coffee and a paper bag, egg and cheese, no meat. She took it, nodded, then looked at him with the faintest flicker of something he couldn't read. He sat down on the porch swing and gestured to the truck in the driveway. Can you believe it? We're actually pulling this off. Elaine sipped her coffee. He looked out over the lake. You'll thank me for this one day. She looked too, but not at the water, at his reflection in the window. The swing creaked. The birds called, and inside her, the storm kept building. The next morning, the buyer arrived. A black SUV rolled up the gravel driveway just after 9. 2 men stepped out, one in a navy blazer and brown leather shoes, the other silent, tall, possibly security. Elaine watched from the kitchen window, her hands drying a dish that didn't need drying. Michael jogged outside with too much energy. He clapped the buyer on the shoulder, firm handshake, grinning like a man who'd already spent the money. She didn't move. Not yet. Let the scene play out. Michael walked them around the side of the house. He was saying things like, fresh paint, and sunsets over the water, and no property taxes for another quarter. She couldn't hear everything. She didn't need to. A few minutes later, Michael waved her out. Mommy called. Too cheerful? Come say hello to Mr. Barrett. Elaine walked onto the porch, smoothing the front of her sweater. The buyer turned toward her with a courteous nod. Mrs. Morgan, he said, extending a hand. Pleasure? She shook it. Is it? He paused, a flicker of something behind his eyes. Uncertainty. Michael cut in. Mom, Mr. Barrett's with Red Hollow Properties. He's the one taking over the house. Elaine looked at the man carefully, then turned back to Michael. He's buying a house that doesn't belong to you. Michael's mouth tightened. Mom. Barrett looked between them. You did say she was transitioning out. Elaine turned sharply. I'm not transitioning anywhere. Michael's laugh was forced. She's been under a lot of stress. I explained that in the documents. Barrett's voice dropped. I'd like to see those again. Michael's face froze, but only for a second. I'll get them from the car, he said quickly, then walked back toward the driveway. Elaine turned to Barrett. Did he tell you I agreed to this sale? He hesitated. He said you were in early-stage cognitive decline and had granted him temporary financial authority. Her eyes narrowed. And you believed that Barrett looked down. I don't like surprises, Mrs. Morgan, and I don't like being misled. She nodded once. Good. Then you'll understand if I choose not to play along. Michael returned, folder in hand. He flipped it open, pulling out a copy of the power of attorney. Barrett took the paper and read silently. Elaine noticed the slight furrow in his brow. I'd like to verify this with your notary, Barrett said. Michael blinked. Sure. Of course. I can have it sent over. Elaine crossed her arms. She didn't speak. Let the silence hang. Barrett looked at her again. I assume you'll be here another day or two. She smiled faintly. I don't plan to leave at all. Barrett nodded once, then turned back toward his SUV. His assistant followed without a word. When the doors closed and the vehicle pulled away, Michael spun toward her. What are you doing? Elaine kept her voice calm. You said I'd thank you one day. But that day isn't today. Michael's hands went to his hips. He looked down at the ground, then back up. His mouth tight. You want to make this harder than it has to be. Fine, but you're making a mistake. I've made one already, she said softly. I trusted you. That evening, Rachel called. Elaine picked up on the third ring. Mom? Her voice was quieter than usual. I heard the buyer came today. He did, Elaine replied. And he left, confused. A pause. Michael told him you were slipping? I know. Mom, I never said that. He told me he had it under control, that it was for your own good. Elaine's voice didn't rise. I believe you, Rachel sighed. I didn't know how far he was taking it. I thought he just wanted to refinance. Not this. Now you know. Another pause. Then, do you need help? Elaine closed her eyes for a moment. I need you to do nothing. For now, just watch. Watch what your brother dig a very deep hole. The next day, Michael avoided her. He left early, came back late. Boxes continued to disappear from shelves. Rooms were stripped bare. But Elaine noticed the small signs of panic. He checked his phone more often, paced the porch at night, started locking the garage. He wasn't in control anymore. He just didn't know it yet. Elaine called Alan Donnelly again. I need you to initiate a legal stall, she said. You sure, he asked? This will draw heat. I'm done watching him pretend this is his house. Okay, he said. I'll send the notice to the registrar. He can't move forward without clearing the trust. And if he tries, he'll be in violation. Civil fraud at minimum. Jail time, if it escalates. Elaine hung up, then sat by the window. The lake glimmered again, sunlight skipping across the water like it always had. This house had held her joy, her grief, her family. Now, it would hold her justice. That night, Michael knocked on her door. Late, almost midnight. Mom. She opened it slowly. He looked. Tired, eyes sunken, lines deeper than before. Can we talk? She stepped aside. He didn't sit, just hovered. I think we got off on the wrong foot. He began. You mean, when you forged my consent and tried to steal my home? He flinched. Okay, that's how you see it. That's what it was. Michael rubbed his face. The thing is, I needed this. I needed that money. It wasn't about you. There's a lot going on right now. Elaine waited. He didn't elaborate. You're still in over your head, she said. He didn't respond. Michael, she continued, what happens when the buyer pulls out, when they realize the sale isn't legal? His mouth opened, then closed again. Elaine stepped forward, close enough for him to feel it. You're not just losing the house. You're losing the lie that kept you afloat. He turned away. His voice was a whisper. You think you're better than me? She answered without hesitation. No. I think I remembered who I am. You forgot. He left without another word. And she didn't watch him go. Elaine stood at the end of the church pew, hymn book in hand, mouthing the words but not singing. She used to love this part of Sunday mornings, the soft organ chords, the smell of old wood polish, the heat rising gently from the vents below the stained glass windows. But now the air felt different, stiff, judging, heavy. When the service ended, she offered polite smiles to the ushers. As she stepped into the vestibule, two women leaned toward each other near the coat rack. They didn't whisper. They didn't have to. Such a shame. One said, She's not what she used to be. Her son's doing what he can. These things run in families. Elaine tightened her grip on her purse. She moved past them without a word, down the steps and into the cold September air. By the time she got to her car, her hands were trembling. Not from weakness, from rage. She didn't drive straight home. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of the Lakeshore Library. Inside, she moved with purpose, not toward the books, toward the archives room. The clerk at the front desk, a young woman with dyed red hair and headphones tucked behind one ear, looked up. Help you find something. Ma'am, property records, Elaine said. Local transactions. I need a file on Red Hollow properties. The clerk blinked, then nodded. Sure thing. Right this way. An hour later, Elaine sat with a stack of manila folders in front of her. Some of the papers were crisp. Others smelled faintly of mildew and old air. She flipped page after page, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Red Hollow had closed 28 deals in the last 3 years. 16 of them were on distressed properties. 9 were elderly owned. 7 had been tied up in probate challenges within 6 months. Predatory, she thought. That's what this was. Michael hadn't just stumbled into a buyer. He'd found someone who saw her not as a person, but as leverage. Back at the house, Elaine pulled out the accordion folder her husband once kept for tax season. Buried in the back, she found it a letter from their original estate lawyer, dated 7 years ago. It included the name of the initial trust evaluator, someone who had helped them safeguard the property. Someone outside Donnelly's office. A second voice. A second record. She picked up the phone and dialed the number. It rang 4 times. Then, "This is Claire Fulton's office." Elaine paused, then said, "I'd like to confirm a filing from T16, trust documentation. Morgan residence. Can I speak to Ms. Fulton directly?" A pause. Then, "She's out of office today. May I have her call you back?" "Please, tell her Elaine Morgan called." Later that evening, Elaine sat at the kitchen table, the house dimly lit around her. She hadn't turned the TV on, hadn't opened a book, hadn't checked her email. Just silence. And in that silence, the memory of her husband's voice came back. "You always think people like him won't cross the line, but one day they do, and they'll smile while they do it." She remembered the way his eyes had lingered on Michael's name in the will, the way he'd hesitated, then kept it in. Even back then, he must have sensed something. The next day, Michael barged into the kitchen without knocking. His face was flushed, his hair disheveled. Sweat stained the collar of his shirt. "I need to talk to you." Elaine didn't flinch. "Then talk. People are saying things." He snapped. "The buyer called me. Said you questioned the sale. That you've been stirring things up in town." "I answered a question," she said. "If that counts as stirring, perhaps your foundation isn't as solid as you think." He stepped closer. I've had enough of this. You think you're clever, talking to lawyers, pulling old papers from the attic. You can't stop this. Mom, it's done. She looked him in the eye. Then why are you sweating? He blinked. You're worried. She continued. Because something's slipping, and you're just now realizing how far you've fallen. Michael gritted his teeth. You want to fight? No, she said quietly. I want my son back. But I know he's not here. He stared at her, then turned on his heel and stormed out the back door. That night, Claire Fulton called. I reviewed the filing. She said, You're still listed as primary trustee? The sale would require notarized consent from you alone. Elaine exhaled. Then he forged something. If he submitted papers without that consent, he committed fraud. And if the buyer acts on it, they're complicit. Elaine's voice was steady. Then we stop it. Legally, publicly, if we have to. I'll prepare the injunction. We'll block the transfer for now. But if you want full control back, we may need to escalate to civil court. Do it. The next morning, a courier delivered a letter in a red envelope. Elaine opened it slowly. Inside was a copy of the injunction, officially filed with the county recorder's office. The property was now under legal review. The sale couldn't proceed. No buyer could claim ownership. She placed the envelope next to her teacup and sat at the table in silence. She didn't smile. Not yet. Outside, a squirrel darted across the lawn. Birds chattered from the branches above. The lake shimmered like it always had. But something had shifted. This house wasn't just hers again. It was protected. At noon, the phone rang again. Rachel. Mom, I heard. From who, Michael? He's losing it. He said the county froze the sale. That you ambushed him. Elaine's voice was calm. I defended what was mine. I'm proud of you, Rachel whispered. He's scared. Elaine nodded, even though no one could see her. I know. A long silence. Then Rachel added, If you want me to come by, I can. Not yet. Elaine's hand rested on the red envelope. Let him twist a little longer. Rachel arrived without calling first. Elaine was folding laundry in the den when she heard the car tires crunch across the gravel driveway. She didn't rush to the window. She didn't straighten her blouse. She just waited. A soft knock. Not like Michael's aggressive, expectant. This one was tentative, cautious. Elaine opened the door. Rachel stood there in jeans and a pale green cardigan, hair pulled back, eyes rimmed red. She held a small tote bag in one hand, and something fragile in the other, her guilt. I brought you cinnamon rolls, she said. They're still warm. Elaine stepped aside. Come in. They sat in the sunroom, the same room Michael had wanted to convert into a home office. The light streamed through the lace curtains, and the lake reflected in the window behind them. Rachel placed the rolls on the table, unwrapped the foil slowly. The smell of brown sugar and butter filled the room, but neither woman touched them. Elaine folded her hands. Rachel picked at the edge of a napkin. I should have said something, Rachel whispered. Sooner. Elaine didn't reply. She waited. I knew what he was doing felt wrong. I did. But he made it sound like it was all in your best interest. He said you were slipping, that you forgot things, that you'd signed off on everything. Elaine's eyes didn't soften. Her voice was still. And you believed him. Rachel's head dropped. I didn't want to. She looked up. But I was scared. He said if we didn't sell, the creditors would come after him. And then me. He promised it would be clean, that you'd never even notice. Elaine looked out the window. The shoreline was still. But the reflection of the clouds shifted, just enough to change the picture. Fear makes people weak, she said.
But what you did wasn't weakness. It was permission. Rachel flinched. I know. Her voice cracked. I let him lie about you. Elaine turned back to her. You let him turn me into someone fragile. Convenient. Disposable. Rachel's lips trembled. I'm sorry. Silence. Then I know, Elaine said. And that was all. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but something close enough to start from. An hour later, they walked along the back garden path. The hydrangeas were fading into their autumn blues. The soil beneath them held years of roots, memory locked in the ground. Rachel ran her fingers along the fence. Dad loved this stretch, she said. He used to weed this patch on Sunday mornings. Said it helped him think. Elaine nodded. He thought better when his hands were dirty. They stopped at the edge of the yard, the lake just beyond the trees. I never told you, Rachel said, but I found his old notebook once, the one he kept in his coat. Elaine looked at her sharply. The brown leather one, Rachel nodded. It was full of lists, garden layouts, grocery needs, but also us, notes about us. Elaine blinked. What kind of notes Rachel swallowed? Warnings. Wishes. He wrote that if anything ever happened to him, and Michael started pulling away. I was supposed to pull you closer. Elaine's throat tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Rachel's voice broke. Because I thought I failed already. And I was ashamed. Elaine turned toward her daughter. She saw the girl she raised, buried under too many years of silence and surrender. We can't fix what's behind us, she said gently. But we don't have to let it repeat. Rachel's eyes welled with tears. Tell me what to do. Elaine looked back toward the house. A shadow passed in the upstairs window. Michael. He's not afraid of me, she said. Not yet, but he will be. That night, Elaine sat at her desk. She pulled out the red envelope again, the injunction, stamped and sealed. Then she pulled a fresh sheet of paper from the drawer. Thick. Ivory. She uncapped her pen. Michael, I gave you everything. Time, shelter, trust. And you turned it into currency for someone else's debt. You treated this house like an object, a ticket out of your own mistakes. But this place is not your scapegoat. It is not your escape. It is mine. You never once asked me what I needed. You decided, manipulated, convinced your sister to stay silent, lied to a buyer, fabricated documents, and all the while, you smiled. You smiled. I want you to read this carefully. Because it will be the last thing you receive from me that isn't served through a courtroom door. The house remains mine. The law agrees. And now, so will you. You may remove your belongings by Friday. After that, the locks will change. Your mother, Elaine. She slid the letter into an envelope and sealed it. Her hand didn't shake. The next morning, she placed it on the kitchen table, propped against a coffee mug. Michael found it 2 hours later. Elaine was in the garden when she heard the chair scrape against the tile. A door slammed, then silence. She didn't turn to look. Not yet. Instead, she watered the mums. The purple ones her husband used to say looked like stubborn royalty. She stood straight, wiped her hands on her gardening towel, and waited, not for his apology, but for his retreat. The next move would be his, and it would be made from desperation. She was counting on it. Michael didn't speak to her for 2 days. He stayed in the upstairs guest room, closed the door, took his calls outside. Elaine didn't press him. She let the silence do what words no longer could. Each morning,
She moved through the house like a tenant in her own life. Coffee, laundry, pruning the dried stems from her garden. Routine wrapped around her like armor. On the third morning, she noticed the front door had been left ajar. A small stack of papers sat on the entry table, the kind of papers meant to look official, but smelled like desperation. She picked them up. Credit notices, overdue balances, final demands. She scanned the headers, each one addressed to Michael. Not a single one addressed to her, and not a single one paid. She laid them flat on the table, side by side, like evidence. Then she made a call. Alan. She said when the line connected, I want to proceed. You're sure I've waited long enough? Serve him the final notice. Freeze the transfer. Attach the lien if you have to. There was a pause on the other end. Then I'll prepare the motion today. But once it's filed, the fallout will begin. He'll know he's legally exposed. Elaine exhaled slowly. I'm counting on it. That afternoon, she drove to the bank. Not the local one, the downtown branch. The one Michael didn't know about. She met Alan Donnelly in person. He wore a navy suit and tired eyes, carrying a briefcase and a neutral expression. In a side office, they signed papers in silence. Each signature was a nail in the coffin Michael built for himself. You understand, this gives you full control of the trust moving forward, Alan asked. Even if he contests. The law is on your side. I do. She pressed her pen firmly against the final line, then sat back in her chair. Lighter, calmer. I never wanted it to end like this, she murmured. Alan nodded. But you wanted it to end. That evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, Elaine returned home. Michael's car was gone. She walked up the porch steps and found an envelope taped to the door. Her name scrawled across the front in block letters rushed, almost angry. She pulled it free and stepped inside before opening it. The note was short. If you want a war, you've got it, but you won't win. I'll make sure you regret this. I was your son once. Not anymore. Elaine folded the paper carefully, slid it into the side drawer of the hallway table. Then she locked the front door. Twice. That night, Rachel called again. He texted me, she said, her voice shaky. Said I took your side. That I betrayed him. You didn't, Elaine replied. He betrayed himself. He just doesn't see it yet. I don't know what to say to him anymore. Then say nothing. Rachel was quiet for a long time. Then, he's unraveling. Mom, I can feel it. I know. Do you want me to come back? No, Elaine said. Not yet. I need to do this alone. Rachel exhaled softly. I wish Dad were here. Elaine's eyes drifted to the mantel, to the framed photo taken in this very house, her husband laughing with his arms around them both. So do I. The next morning, the courier returned. A man in a gray jacket handed her a packet in a plastic sleeve. Elaine signed for it and thanked him. Inside the official restraining order on the house's transfer, the buyer had received notice. Michael would have too. There was now a full legal freeze on the property. Nothing could be sold, signed, or altered without Elaine's consent. She was no longer asking for power. She had claimed it. Michael returned later that day. No warning, just the sound of his keys fumbling against the front door trying to unlock a lock that had been changed. Elaine opened the door before he could knock. He stood there, shoulders tense, jaw clenched. You changed the locks. Yes, this is still my house. No, she said calmly. It never was. He shoved a paper toward her. Do you even know what you've done? The buyers are pulling out. The deal is dead. And now I've got a lawsuit on my hands. Elaine didn't take the paper. Didn't flinch. You forged my signature. Michael, lied to a buyer, misled your own sister, and now you want sympathy. I needed that money, he shouted. Do you know how deep I'm in? Her voice was quiet. Yes. She looked him over. All those envelopes on the table, I read them. His face flushed. You shouldn't have touched my mail. You shouldn't have stolen my home. A long silence stretched between them. The wind shifted across the porch. Leaves rattled from the trees. I'm your son, he said bitterly. Elaine nodded. You were... He stared at her like she'd hit him. But she didn't waver, didn't blink. You brought this on yourself. She continued. And now, you can live with it. He turned away, stumbled down the steps. She watched him go. And this time, she didn't look away. That night, Elaine sat at her husband's desk. She pulled out his old leather notebook. The one Rachel had mentioned. She flipped to the back pages. There, in neat handwriting, was a sentence underlined twice. Prepare for storms. Expect betrayal, but never hand over your name. Elaine touched the ink gently, then closed the book. She wasn't angry anymore. Just ready. Elaine stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the pearl earrings her husband had given her 30 years ago. She hadn't worn them since his funeral. Tonight wasn't a funeral, but something was definitely ending. Downstairs, the dining room table gleamed beneath a fresh tablecloth. Candles flickered in glass holders. The good china inherited from her mother had been set for 4. The roast was in the oven, a spinach salad chilled in the fridge. Wine glasses shimmered in the soft light. Waiting, Michael had asked for dinner. He texted her 2 days ago, the morning after she locked him out. Let's talk. 1 meal. You said you wanted your son back. Give him a seat at the table. Elaine had read it twice, then once more, just to be sure it wasn't a trap. She didn't reply, but she sent a single message to Rachel instead. Be here at 6:15. Wear something calm. At 6:07, Rachel arrived. Muted blue dress. Cardigan. Hair brushed and pinned. She carried a bottle of wine and a stack of anxiety. You sure about this? She asked, as Elaine let her in. No, Elaine said, but we're doing it anyway. At 6:24, Michael walked through the door. He didn't knock. He wore a blazer. Navy. Clean. Pressed. Like he still thought presentation could erase damage. He smiled when he saw the table. Real candles. Real silver. He probably expected paper plates and cold silence. Well, he said, pulling out a chair. This is unexpected. Elaine didn't respond. She gestured for him to sit. Rachel took the seat opposite Michael. Elaine at the head. No one reached for the wine. Not yet. They ate slowly. Elaine served the roast with practiced grace. The potatoes were soft, the salad crisp. Michael talked. Too much. He told stories about work, a job no one believed he still had. He complimented the food, asked Rachel how her car was running. Elaine let him talk. She answered with nods and mms. Rachel smiled when required, but the space between them was filled with more truth than anything Michael said. Finally, after dessert and apple tart, warm Elaine stood. She took her glass in hand, tapped the rim once with her spoon. The sound rang out, clear and cold. Michael looked up, still smiling. I'd like to say something, she said. Rachel sat straighter. Michael leaned back, waiting to be praised. Applauded. Forgiven. Elaine looked at both of them. I made a mistake, she said. I thought love would be enough. That raising a child right meant they'd stay right. That honesty passed through blood like eye color. Michael's smile faded. Elaine continued, her voice steady. I waited for apologies. I made space for explanations. I gave you more time than you earned. Michael? Rachel stared at her brother. His eyes darkened, jaw tight. Elaine reached into the side drawer of the buffet and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She set it gently on the table beside her wine glass. Michael glanced at it. Didn't touch it. That's a signed letter from my lawyer, she said. It outlines the legal timeline of your attempted fraud, including witness statements, buyer correspondence, and bank verification. The sale is frozen. The trust is intact. And I filed for civil damages. Michael opened his mouth, but she raised her hand. I'm not finished. He closed it. Elaine looked at Rachel. You were pulled in without full knowledge. You've come forward. And I believe you. Rachel blinked, her throat tightening. Elaine turned back to Michael. You will have 48 hours to remove the rest of your belongings from the house. After that, anything left will be discarded. You will not contact me directly. Any future communication must go through legal counsel. Michael laughed. Not a real laugh, more like the sound of glass breaking. You think you're in control now? Because you hired a lawyer. Elaine didn't blink. I was always in control. I just chose to be quiet. He leaned forward. Voice low. You're going to die in this house alone. Elaine leaned in too. No. I'm going to live in this house with dignity. That's something you sold off a long time ago. He stared at her, long and hard. Then he looked at Rachel. You're siding with her? Rachel nodded, eyes damp. I'm choosing decency. Michael shoved his chair back. It scraped loudly across the wood. You're both pathetic, he spat. Enjoy your little fortress. You won't see me again. Elaine stood as he stormed out. The front door slammed so hard the walls rattled. Silence returned, deeper than before. Elaine exhaled, then turned to the table. She blew out each candle. One by one, Rachel stood. I'm sorry it had to go like that. Elaine shook her head. It had to go. That's what matters. They stood there, side by side, in the cooling light of the dining room. Finally, Rachel said, I'll help you box up whatever he left. Tomorrow. Elaine nodded. Thank you. They didn't clean the table that night. They left the crumbs, the tart, the empty seats. Proof that the truth had finally eaten. The next morning, Elaine opened the front door and stepped into a different kind of quiet. Not the silence of uncertainty, but the peace that follows a line finally drawn. The air smelled of wet leaves and cooling pine. A fog curled along the lake's surface like a sleeping animal, hiding the far shore in mist. She stood on the porch in her slippers, coffee in hand, and watched the world breathe. No boxes, no shouting, no sun pretending to be a savior, just the sound of a crow in the trees and the echo of her own stillness. Behind her, the house held its breath, unpacked, unbothered, still hers. Rachel arrived at 9:30 a.m. sharp. She wore jeans and a sweatshirt that said, mildly tired but trying, and carried 2 large storage tubs in the trunk of her hatchback. Let's do this, she said. Elaine nodded and held the door open. Together, they climbed the stairs and entered the guest room Michael had claimed. It was exactly as he'd left it. Suitcase open, dresser drawers half filled, a laptop charger dangling from the wall like a loose tail. Rachel stood still for a moment, scanning the space. You know, she said softly. Part of me hoped he'd come back last night, not to argue, just to apologize. Elaine moved toward the closet. I stopped hoping for that the day he sold my future out from under me. They began to pack. Clothes first shoved carelessly into the tubs, then books, shoes, a few toiletries. Elaine noticed a framed photo on the nightstand, a younger Michael holding a newborn in the hospital room. His smile back then had been real, unmasked, hopeful. She handed it to Rachel. You want this? Rachel hesitated, then shook her head. Not like this. Not now. Elaine placed it face down in the tub. By noon, they'd cleared everything. Not a single trace of him remained. Elaine taped a note to the top of the final box. Your 48 hours started yesterday. Your things are on the porch. After that, they're gone. Later that afternoon, Elaine received a call. Unknown number. She answered anyway. This is Detective Colburn with the county sheriff's office. Is this Elaine Morgan? Her stomach tightened. Yes. I'm calling in reference to a report filed this morning. Mr. Michael Morgan has alleged that you illegally seized his property and changed the locks on a shared home. Elaine sat down. I assume he failed to mention the legal injunction, the verified fraud investigation, and the restraining order. There was a pause. Ma'am, we've reviewed the preliminary documents. Your name is on the deed and trust as sole trustee, but I wanted to call and confirm your side before we proceed. I have full legal authority over the home. His name was never on the trust. I have documentation from 2 attorneys. Understood. Would you be willing to provide those? I'll have them emailed within the hour. Thank you. And if he contacts you again directly, don't engage. Just let us know. Elaine nodded, her voice flat. I don't intend to engage with ghosts. That night, Elaine and Rachel sat on the back porch as the sun melted into the lake. They drank tea from mismatched mugs. Neither said much. They didn't need to. Rachel broke the silence first. You know what scares me? She asked. That I didn't see it happening. That he changed right under my nose, and I just let it happen. Elaine looked at her daughter, her posture, her quiet guilt. Michael didn't change overnight, she said. He just ran out of places to hide who he was becoming. Rachel blinked away tears. I don't know if I want to forgive him. Elaine sipped her tea. Forgiveness is a gift, but you don't owe it to people who weaponized your silence. Rachel looked at her mother with new eyes. The kind of eyes daughters get when they stop needing to be protected and start choosing who to become. Will he be okay? Rachel asked softly. Elaine looked out across the dark water. I don't know, but he'll be alone, and that might be the only thing left to teach him. The next day, the boxes were gone. Elaine hadn't heard a car, hadn't seen footsteps, but by morning, the porch was empty, not even a note. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, then stepped outside. She ran her hand over the railing, rough in spots, but still holding. Michael had finally taken what he came for and left behind what he couldn't carry. Regret, entitlement, and an empty space where family used to live. The letter arrived 3 days later. A plain envelope, no return address, postmarked from the next county over. Elaine opened it at the kitchen table. Rachel sat beside her, arms folded tight. Inside, one folded page. Mom, I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to believe me. But I want you to know this. It wasn't about the house. It was about feeling like I'd failed at everything else. I was drowning, and I thought if I could control one thing, just one, I could breathe again. I see now what I did. I don't expect a reply, but I'll always carry this. Michael Elaine read it twice, then folded it carefully and slid it into the drawer next to the others' birth certificates. Legal records. Trust papers. Rachel didn't speak. Elaine finally said, maybe the only honest thing he said in months. Rachel tilted her head. You going to write back? Elaine looked out the window. The trees were turning now, leaves shifting from green to orange to something deeper, something earned. No, she said, but I won't throw it away, either. That night, she stood barefoot in the sunroom, the lake just barely visible in the moonlight. She touched the windowsill, smoothed the curtain, listened to the house breathe with her. For the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like she was defending her past. It felt like she was protecting her future. 3 weeks passed. The leaves turned gold, and Elaine began to live again. Not just survive, not just defend, but live. She woke earlier each morning, not out of fear, but intention. She brewed her coffee strong, opened the windows even when it was cold, started humming again while sweeping the kitchen floor. Rachel visited more often, sometimes to help, sometimes just to sit. They planted bulbs in the garden, late season ones, tulips and daffodils that would sleep beneath the frost and return like proof that something bruised could still bloom. One Thursday afternoon, Elaine walked into the town hall alone. She carried a folder tucked under her arm and wore her late husband's brown wool coat. It was too big, but it made her feel grounded the way roots cling to earth just before the storm hits. Inside, she waited in line behind a man registering a boat and a young woman updating her voter ID. When it was her turn, the clerk smiled. "Good to see you, Mrs. Morgan. What brings you in today?" Elaine set the folder on the counter and slid it forward. "I'd like to update the deed and file a formal record of guardianship over the property," she said. "No shared interest. No secondary trustees. Just me." The clerk blinked, then opened the folder. After a moment, she nodded. "You've got everything in order here. You'll need to sign in 2 places, and then it'll be official." Elaine reached for the pen. Her signature came out steady, sharp. By the time she walked out of the building, the wind had picked up, but it didn't chill her. It reminded her she was standing, unafraid. That evening, she called Rachel. "It's done," she said simply. Rachel didn't ask what she meant. She knew. They made plans to meet Sunday, just the 2 of them, to sort through the last of the storage boxes and donate what they could. Before hanging up, Rachel said something that lingered. "You know, Mom. I always thought Dad was the strong one, but now I think maybe he just went first. You were always going to be the one who stayed standing." Elaine didn't cry, but she felt something shift in her chest, like a stone turning into soil. The next morning, a certified letter arrived. Another envelope. This one with a return address, Morgan and Pine, LLP, the law firm Michael had briefly worked with years ago, before whatever happened made him leave. Elaine stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside was a formal notice Michael was filing a petition to contest the trust. He was claiming undue influence, claiming she wasn't of sound mind when she signed the estate papers, claiming the property had been promised to him verbally in his father's final days. Elaine read the letter 3 times, not because she didn't understand, but because she was deciding carefully which emotion to choose. Anger was too small, disappointment too familiar. What she felt was tired. Not weak, just done. She called Alan. He picked up after 1 ring. "I saw it," he said immediately. "The filing. It won't go anywhere. It's smoke. He's trying to stall or scare you." Elaine's voice was quiet. "But it means he's not finished." "No," Alan said, "but you are, and that matters more." Rachel came over that afternoon with muffins. Pumpkin, still warm. Elaine handed her the letter. Watched her face change. Not surprise, just sorrow. "He's digging down," Rachel said, "and all he's finding is more dirt." They sat in the sunroom again. The lake shimmered through the glass. The house, still and safe, seemed to listen. Elaine sipped her tea. "Let him try," she said finally. "He's not fighting for the house anymore. He's fighting not to be the villain in the story." Rachel nodded. "But it's too late for that." That Sunday, Elaine and Rachel drove to the donation center together. The trunk full of what once filled Michael's room clothes, books, a few tools. Elaine didn't keep anything, not even the framed photo. She didn't need reminders. She had memory. They pulled up to the back entrance, where volunteers waited beside large carts. "Anything fragile?" a young man asked. Elaine shook her head. "Not anymore." They drove home in silence, windows cracked just enough to let in the cool autumn air. "At a red light," Rachel said. Do you think he'll actually show up in court? Elaine's eyes didn't leave the road.
No. She paused. But part of me hopes he does, so he can see me standing on the other side of the room, not flinching. That night, Elaine couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch, blanket over her lap, notebook in hand. She opened to a fresh page and began to write. Not a letter, not a speech. Just a list. The hydrangeas bloomed late. Rachel calls every Sunday now. I slept through the night last Thursday. I said no to someone and didn't apologize. I kept my name. I kept my house. I kept myself. She stared at the last line, pen hovering. Then she underlined it, twice. Elaine stood outside the courthouse. Gray stone, heavy doors, pillars that looked more like threats than support. She wore her best black coat and low-heeled boots not to impress anyone, but to feel anchored. Rachel walked beside her, arms folded tight against the cold. I can go in with you, Rachel offered. Elaine shook her head. I need to do this part myself. Inside, the building smelled like dust, old ink, and expensive mistakes. At security, she placed her purse in the tray and stepped through the scanner. The officer smiled politely. You here for the Morgan Trust case? She blinked. I am. First door on the left. They've just started. Elaine didn't thank him. She just walked. In the courtroom, Michael sat at the front table. His suit was too big, like it had been borrowed. Or maybe it had just stopped fitting like everything else in his life. His attorney, a younger man, clearly fresh out of somewhere expensive, whispered something to him. Michael didn't turn to look at her as she entered. Elaine took a seat in the back. She wasn't required to testify today. This was the preliminary motion. Just an opening dance, a chance for Michael to make a fool of himself in a suit and tie. The judge, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a voice like sandpaper, called the room to order. Mr. Morgan, she said, flipping through the packet. You filed to contest the legitimacy of your mother's trust, claiming verbal assurances and questions of mental fitness. Do you have documentation? Michael's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we have statements from extended family indicating confusion on Mrs. Morgan's part, plus text records showing erratic responses. Elaine didn't react. She didn't have to. The judge raised an eyebrow. Extended family. Anyone with direct legal access. Medical assessments? Not at this time, the lawyer admitted. The judge turned to Michael. Do you have any written agreements, witnesses to the alleged verbal promises? Michael cleared his throat. No, Your Honor. But my father always said. This isn't about what your father said, she cut in. It's about what was filed. Legally. Verifiably. She looked at the paperwork again. I see a clear, notarized trust designating Mrs. Morgan as sole trustee, reaffirmed twice. No signs of coercion. No medical disputes on record. Michael's mouth opened, then closed. The judge leaned back. Mr. Morgan, you may believe you are owed something, but belief doesn't supersede law. She picked up the gavel. Petition to contest is dismissed. Case closed. She banged it once. Elaine's heart didn't leap. It just settled like a stone in still water. Outside the courthouse, Michael stood near the curb, alone. No press, no fanfare, just the buzz of traffic and the heavy weight of reality. Elaine walked past him, slow and deliberate. He turned, expecting something. A glance, a word, an invitation to lick his wounds. She stopped, met his eyes. I'm not angry anymore, she said. He looked confused, wounded, maybe even relieved. But that doesn't mean I forgive you. He swallowed. Then what does it mean? It means, she said softly, that I've put down the weight you gave me, and I won't carry it for you anymore. She turned and walked away. Rachel was waiting by the car. That evening, they lit a fire in the living room, a small one crackling. Warm, more for the ritual than the heat. Elaine sat with her legs curled beneath her, a book in her lap. But she wasn't reading. Rachel came in with 2 mugs of tea and handed one over. Mom? Yes. You didn't have to face him today. You could have let the lawyer do it all. Elaine nodded. I know. Then why did you go? Elaine looked into the fire. I needed to see the moment he realized I wasn't broken. Rachel sat beside her. They didn't speak for a while. The flames danced. The wind pressed against the windows, but didn't get in. I'm proud of you, Rachel said finally. Elaine turned, smiled faintly. I'm proud of me too. The next week, she hosted her first dinner guest since it all began. An old friend from church, Carla, who brought a peach cobbler and far too much gossip. They ate at the kitchen table, not the formal dining room. No candles, just real laughter. You look 10 years younger, Carla said, spooning more cobbler into her bowl. I kept waiting for you to disappear like most women do when things get hard. But here you are, elbows out, stronger than the storm. Elaine chuckled. I thought about disappearing. But then I remembered this house has seen more of me than anyone. It deserves the version that didn't fold. Carla grinned. Well, you're back now, and so is that backbone I always admired. Elaine sipped her tea. It never left. I just forgot how to use it. The next morning, Elaine took a walk around the property. She stopped at the edge of the lake, toes on the dewy grass. The water was still. No fog, no ripples, just the reflection of trees that refused to fall early. She closed her eyes, let the breeze wrap around her like an old scarf, and for the first time in months, there was no noise in her head. No what-ifs, no legal loops, no sun-shaped ache. Just the moment, just the house, just her. When she returned to the kitchen, the phone was ringing. She let it go to voicemail. She didn't check it right away. Instead, she opened her notebook and wrote, "The fight is over. I didn't lose." He walked away. I stayed. This home is mine. I am not the woman he mistook for weak. I am still here, still whole, still enough. Then she stood and made herself breakfast. 2 weeks later, the town held its annual autumn festival. Food trucks lined the old high school parking lot. Local bands played on a small wooden stage decorated with hay bales and mums. Elaine hadn't planned on going. She told herself she was too tired, that the crowds would be irritating, that she didn't care anymore about pumpkin bread or cider tastings. But Rachel had called the night before. Let's just go, she said. No drama, no tension, just a walk. Maybe a hot pretzel. You deserve to be seen again, not just as the woman who survived a scandal, but as you. Elaine had smiled at that, not because it flattered her, but because it was true. She hadn't shown her face in town since Michael's court petition was dismissed. Not out of shame, out of self-preservation. But self-preservation was no longer necessary. Not here, not now. So she went. She wore a navy scarf wrapped loosely around her neck and carried a crossbody bag small, light, practical. Her boots were dusty but sturdy, and her lipstick was a shade darker than usual. The air smelled like kettle corn and cinnamon. Leaves crunched underfoot. Children with painted faces ran past her, chasing each other through rows of carved pumpkins. Rachel walked beside her, holding a small cider in a paper cup.
They passed vendors and volunteers. Some waved awkwardly, unsure if they should say anything. Others offered soft smiles, as if to say, "We heard. We're still here." Elaine nodded graciously. She didn't need gossip. She needed roots. And they were still here, buried under fear and timidity, but ready to grow again. Near the far end of the festival, by the booth selling homemade soaps and hand-knitted scarves, she ran into Margaret Brighton. Margaret had been on the church committee for years. She was the kind of woman who wore brooches shaped like birds and called everyone dear with a pointed smile. Elaine braced herself. "Well, Elaine," Margaret said, raising an eyebrow. "You've been quite the topic lately." "I imagine so." Margaret leaned in slightly. "I always said that house of yours had backbone. Seems you do too." Elaine tilted her head. "I never lost it. I just stopped lending it out." Margaret blinked, lips parting slightly, then nodded, as if granting approval, as she walked away. Rachel laughed. "That was the most polite middle finger I've ever witnessed." Elaine smiled. "It's an art." They spent another hour browsing the stalls. Elaine bought a jar of lavender honey. Rachel picked up a pair of clay earrings in the shape of tiny apples. For a while, it felt like they had always done this, just mother and daughter, moving easily through the spaces they used to avoid. No shadows, no guilt. And then, just as they turned toward the exit, she saw him, Michael, standing alone near the cider stand, hands shoved into the pockets of his coat. No table, no date. Just a man trying not to look like he noticed everyone avoiding him. Rachel tensed beside her. "You okay?" Elaine nodded. "I'm not the one hiding anymore." Michael looked up. Their eyes met. He froze for just a moment, then gave her a stiff nod. No smile, no wave. Elaine didn't respond. She just turned to Rachel and said, "Ready to head home. Back at the house." They set the honey and earrings on the kitchen counter. Rachel pulled off her jacket and leaned against the wall, exhaling. "He looked terrible," she said. Elaine poured water into the kettle. "Consequences usually do." Rachel bit her lip. "You think he'll try again?" Elaine shook her head. "No." That was the look of someone who finally ran out of angles. She placed 2 mugs on the table. Rachel sat. "Do you regret anything?" Rachel asked. Elaine stirred her tea, thoughtful. "I regret that I let fear silence me for so long," she said. "That I mistook tolerance for love, and that I thought protecting my peace meant protecting his reputation." Rachel reached out, touched her hand. "You fixed it. You didn't run." Elaine looked her daughter in the eye. "Neither did you." That night, after Rachel left, Elaine pulled the ladder from the hall closet and climbed into the attic. It had been years since she'd gone up. The space smelled of cedar and dust and insulation. She clicked on the single bulb and walked slowly across the wooden beams. In the far corner, she found a stack of boxes labeled Allen Personal, her husband's things from the office. She opened the top one. Inside were journals, folders, a wooden box with brass corners, and a small framed photograph of their wedding day. She pulled the journals out carefully. Allen's handwriting was neat and slanted, blue ink that had barely faded. On the first page of one, he had written, "The greatest lie we teach men is that strength is louder than softness. But I married a woman who could whisper and still shake the ground." Elaine pressed her fingers gently to the words. She didn't cry. "Not this time." But she whispered into the rafters, "I still hear you." A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Just her name, in simple cursive. Inside, Mom. "I saw you at the festival. I wanted to say something. I didn't. You looked free.
And I don't know how to forgive myself for being the one who tried to steal that from you. I won't write again. I won't contest anything else. I've lost, but I do hope. One day, the memory of me doesn't hurt as much. I hope you'll remember something good. Michael. Elaine stared at the letter. It was cleaner than the first one. Less angry. More broken. She folded it once, did not throw it away. But she didn't add it to the legal file, either. She slipped it into the back of Alan's journal, tucked behind the page where he wrote about her whisper. Some truths belong together, even the ugly ones. That night, Elaine stood by the lake in her robe. The moon hung full above the water, painting it silver and endless. She breathed in, held it, let it go. She was done fighting, and for the first time in a long time, she believed that meant peace, not surrender. The first frost arrived quietly. Elaine woke to see the garden glittering like glass, each leaf outlined in white, delicate and sharp. She stood at the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a mug, watching the frost melt under the rising sun. The lake looked colder now. Not angry, just still. Rachel arrived later that morning with boxes of Christmas decorations. You're early, Elaine said, smiling as she opened the door. Rachel held up a paper bag. Maple scones? I come bearing gifts. Elaine stepped aside. Well then, let's earn them. They spent the next few hours unwrapping ornaments from tissue paper, some faded and frayed. There were pine cones painted with gold from Rachel's kindergarten craft days, ceramic angels missing wings, and a few of Alan's old wooden trains now dusty, but intact. Elaine held up one with red wheels. He carved this on the porch one summer, she said. Told Michael not everything that moves needs batteries. Rachel placed it gently on the side table. I forgot he made these. I forgot a lot. Elaine paused. Sometimes forgetting is survival. Sometimes it's just breath between chapters. Rachel glanced up. Is that what this is? A new chapter. Elaine tied a ribbon to a branch. No, this is a new book. Later. They moved into the living room and opened the last box string lights. Half of them were tangled. Some flickered with defiance. They laughed while trying to untangle the mess. Rachel on the floor, Elaine on the couch, both swearing softly. Mom, Rachel said, finally freeing a knot. What are you going to do with the sunroom? Elaine glanced toward it. The room had been many things: a reading nook, a game space, her husband's morning retreat, Michael's almost office, and most recently, a courtroom of its own. I'm not sure, she said, but it deserves something peaceful. Rachel smiled. A room doesn't have to be useful to be beautiful. Elaine nodded, like she understood that for the first time. The next day, she took a walk down to the edge of the property to the tree Michael had carved into as a teenager. A crooked M+ inside a shaky heart. He'd never said who the was. The carving was weather-worn now, but still there. She ran her fingers over the bark. Didn't cry. Didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled a small piece of chalk from her coat pocket, and beneath the carving, she wrote, "Still standing." Then she stepped back and walked away. That afternoon, she met with her attorney, Alan Donnelly, for what they both agreed would be the final time, at least for now. I have your updated deed, he said, sliding the paper across the table, and the final motion confirming the dismissal of all legal challenges. Nothing remains contested. Elaine signed without asking questions. She knew what the papers meant. They meant she could rest. Also, Alan added, we filed for a fraud record. Michael's name is on it. Won't affect his future unless he tries something again. Elaine nodded.
Let it sit. Sometimes a quiet warning is louder than a sentence. He raised an eyebrow. You're more diplomatic than I expected. Elaine smiled. I'm not interested in revenge, just distance. On her way home. Elaine stopped at the florist. She hadn't bought flowers since Alan's funeral. But today, she picked out a bouquet of deep red dahlias, sprigs of pine, and one white camellia, the flower of longevity and discretion. She placed it on her kitchen table. No occasion, no guest. Just because she was still here. The first snow came 2 days later. Not a storm, just a flurry. Just enough to dust the roof and outline the porch steps. Elaine spent the morning reorganizing the sunroom. She cleared out the old furniture, hung linen curtains, placed a small writing desk near the window, set up a radio, the kind that played classical, jazz, and silence when you needed it. She found Alan's leather notebook and placed it in the desk drawer. Next to it, she added a fresh journal blank. She wrote on the first page, "This house was almost stolen from me. But I stayed. I rebuilt. Not with nails or lawyers, with truth, with backbone, with Rachel." She paused, then added, "Forgiveness is not the same as permission, and healing isn't waiting for an apology." She underlined that twice. That evening, Rachel brought over dinner, roasted squash, garlic bread, and a bottle of wine. They sat in the sunroom, eating off mismatched plates and laughing at the sound of their own chewing echoing through the freshly cleared space. "This is my favorite room now," Rachel said, stretching her legs across a throw blanket. Elaine looked around. "It's the only room that doesn't owe anyone anything anymore." Rachel raised her glass. "To rooms that hold us, and to the women who claim them back." Elaine clinked hers gently. "To the ones who stopped waiting to be rescued." Before bed, Elaine lit a candle in the kitchen window. Not for tradition, not for hope. Just as a reminder, that light belongs inside the house, and no one gets to steal it again. The final letter came the next morning. A small envelope, pale blue, postmarked from another state. Inside, only a single page I left. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. "I'll never ask you to forgive me again, but I wanted you to know I saw the woman you became, and I finally understand what I lost. I won't write again. Goodbye. M." Elaine read it. Twice. Then she walked out to the lake. The snow hadn't stuck. The air was clean and sharp. She stood at the edge and let the wind lift the letter from her fingers. It floated down, landed in the water, and sank slowly. No ceremony, no sorrow, just release. That night, the wind howled around the house, but it didn't get in. The windows stayed shut, the walls stayed warm, and Elaine slept for 10 full hours. And when she woke, she made cinnamon rolls. For no one but herself. By December, the lake had frozen. Not deep enough to walk on, but solid enough to remind Elaine that everything, eventually, settles. She stood on the porch with her morning coffee, wrapped in a quilt Rachel had given her years ago. Blue and gray patches, hand-stitched borders, the corners fraying just a little like they'd lived through something together. The sky was pale with winter, the wind gentle, but sure of itself. Elaine took a deep breath. Inhale, hold, exhale. Nothing hurt. Not the silence, not the cold, not even the memory of betrayal. It was all part of the story now, but it no longer controlled the ending. She spent the morning writing letters. Not to Michael, not to lawyers, to herself, to the woman she had been 6 months ago, to the version of herself that was too scared to fight back, too polite to draw the line, too loyal to ask, "What do I deserve?" She wrote,
You thought you had to lose everything to keep the peace. But peace isn't silence. It's truth that doesn't tremble. And look at you now, standing inside the home they thought they could take. At noon, Rachel arrived with her new partner, Jamie, a quiet, kind-eyed teacher who brought a potted rosemary plant as a gift. Elaine smiled. Thank you. I'll try not to kill it. Jamie grinned. It's hard to kill, just like you, from what I've heard.
Rachel shot them both a look. Okay, maybe ease into the dark jokes. They sat in the sunroom, eating soup and bread, the rosemary plant resting on the windowsill like it belonged there. Elaine liked Jamie, not because they were charming, but because they didn't fill every silence. They let Rachel shine, and they listened more than they spoke. That was enough. Later that afternoon, they all decorated the tree. Elaine let Rachel hang the sentimental ones, the wooden trains, the cracked ceramic angel, the little porcelain house that looked suspiciously like the real one. Jamie added a few paper snowflakes and one felt star. When they finished, Rachel turned off the overhead light. The tree glowed in the dusk, soft, certain. Elaine stepped back, and in her chest, something shifted. A warm click, like the closing of a book whose final sentence didn't ask for applause, just peace. That night, after Rachel and Jamie left, Elaine did something she hadn't done in over a decade. She played music, not on the radio, not in the background. She pulled out the old record player Alan had loved, the one gathering dust in the hall closet. She cleaned it carefully, set the needle, dropped the vinyl. It was a jazz album they used to slow dance to in the kitchen, Ella Fitzgerald, Honey, and Smoke. The music filled the house like it had been waiting for permission to return. Elaine didn't dance. Not at first. She just listened, let it fill the places where pain had lived. Then, without thinking, she stepped onto the kitchen tile and swayed. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. A turn. No partner. No performance. Just a woman in her kitchen, letting herself feel joy without apology. The next morning, she woke with the soft ache of muscles used for something beautiful. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Today I danced in the house they tried to take from me, and the floor held. They say ghosts don't leave until you tell them to. So I did. And they're gone. I'm still here." Later that week, she got a call from the community center. They were organizing a support group, not therapy, just a safe circle, for women who had been taken advantage of by family members, by spouses, by well-meaning sons. The woman on the phone said, "We were hoping you'd speak at the first meeting. Just share your story. You don't have to say yes." Elaine was quiet, then said, "I'm not a speaker. I'm not brave like that." The woman replied, "Mrs. Morgan, you kept your house and your name. That's brave enough." 2 weeks later, Elaine stood in a circle of 15 women, some older, some younger, a few still in the thick of it. She wore a soft gray sweater and a necklace Rachel had given her, a single silver charm shaped like a door. She took a deep breath and began. "I thought love meant forgiveness without condition. I thought being a mother meant never saying no. But when my son tried to sell the roof over my head without asking, I realized something." She looked around, met their eyes. It's not betrayal to protect yourself. It's survival. And there's nothing shameful about surviving. Afterward, 2 women hugged her. One cried in her arms. Another whispered, "Thank you. I didn't think I could leave until I heard your story." Elaine walked out of the center that night with her coat unbuttoned, snowflakes catching in her hair, a small smile on her lips. Back home, she lit the fireplace, sat with a cup of tea, and wrote one last entry in her notebook. They said this was the story of a son who betrayed his mother.
But they were wrong. This is the story of a woman who remembered who she was and stayed.